In 1942, the Ministry of Food told every British family, dig up your lawns, plant vegetables, grow your own food. They called it Dig for Victory. By 1943, Britain had 1.4 million allotments, and families were growing almost half of their own food. Fast forward to today, most of us can't even name 5 vegetables that survive a British winter. Here's what nobody tells you. Number 18 fed entire streets during the miners' strikes. Number 7 was so precious during rationing that families padlocked their vegetable patches. Number 2 gave fresh food for 9 months straight, all from a plot smaller than a parking space. These 25 vegetables kept families alive when wages disappeared and shop shelves ran empty. Before supermarkets, before frozen peas, before strawberries flown in from Spain all year round, British families knew exactly what to grow to survive. Some of this knowledge died with our grandparents. The rest got buried under garden centers selling ornamental grasses and decking. But if you knew what your grandfather knew, you'd never panic over a price rise again. Before we dive in, hit subscribe, because what you're about to learn could change the way you think about your garden forever. Let's count down the 25 vegetables that saved British families when money vanished. Number 1. Cabbages. The ultimate survival vegetable. Cabbages topped this list because they fed more British families through more hard times than anything else that grew. Sown in spring, transplanted in summer, and harvested from autumn through winter, cabbages provided when everything else failed. Your grandmother grew 3 types of cabbage: spring cabbage for the hungry gap, summer cabbage for fresh eating, and winter cabbage for storing. A single head weighed 3 or 4 pounds, enough to stretch across multiple meals. Shredded raw, boiled with bacon, fermented as sauerkraut, or simply stored in the shed for months, cabbage was the vegetable you could rely on absolutely. During both World Wars, cabbage patches saved families from hunger. The smell of boiling cabbage drifting through terrace streets meant dinner was coming. Modern tastes dismiss cabbage as boring. Your grandmother knew it was survival. Number 2, perpetual spinach. Here is the vegetable that outperformed everything else in the garden. Not true spinach, but a type of chard. Perpetual spinach produced pickable leaves for 9 months straight from a single sowing. Your grandmother cut leaves from March until November. The plant regrowing constantly, never bolting, never turning bitter. A row cost almost nothing in seeds, and delivered more meals than any other vegetable on the allotment. The leaves tasted milder than true spinach. The stems cooked like chard, and the reliability was unmatched. Even in the worst summers, perpetual spinach kept producing. Even in dry spells, it survived. This was the vegetable that answered the question of how to eat green vegetables year-round without spending money. Number 3, rhubarb. Rhubarb was not technically a vegetable, but every allotment treated it like one. A single crown planted once produced stalks for 20 years without replanting. Your grandfather forced it under upturned buckets in February. The blanched pink stems tender enough to eat almost raw, the tartness cut through custard, crumble topping, and endless pies that stretch sugar rations further. Scientists now know that forcing rhubarb in darkness converts starches to sugars, creating the tender sweetness that makes forced rhubarb a delicacy. Your grandfather knew this without the science. He inherited the method from his father, who learned it from his. Yorkshire's rhubarb triangle, the area between Wakefield, Moly, and Rothwell, once produced 90% of the world's forced rhubarb. That tradition survives because forced rhubarb still fetches premium prices. But your grandmother grew enough for free, pulling stalks from a plant that asked nothing but occasional manure and patience. When nothing else was ready, when winter seemed endless, rhubarb delivered the first harvest of the year. It tasted like hope. Number 4, spinach. Papy made spinach famous, but British families grew it because nothing else provided so much nutrition from so small a space. Your grandmother sowed spinach thickly and cut it young, the tender leaves wilting in the pan with just a knob of butter. It regrew after cutting, providing multiple harvests from the same row. Iron, vitamins, and genuine flavor came from leaves picked minutes before eating. Frozen spinach, arriving in the 1960s, offered convenience but tasted nothing like fresh. The dark green leaves, slightly earthy, slightly metallic, divided families. Some loved it, Some tolerated it, but everyone ate it because waste was unthinkable. A row of spinach occupied the smallest corner of any allotment and delivered for months. Number 5. Lettuce. Cut and come again. Lettuce meant salads all summer from a single sowing. Your mother learned to harvest outer leaves only, leaving the heart to keep producing for weeks. A row of lettuce costing a few pence in seeds provided salad from June until October. If you knew the trick, bolting was the enemy. The plants suddenly shooting up and turning bitter in hot weather. Successional sowing, new rows every fortnight, solved this problem. Fresh salad washed under the garden tap and dressed with vinegar appeared at every summer meal without a trip to the shops. The crunch, the freshness, the knowledge that this had been growing an hour ago, all of it made homegrown lettuce incomparably better than anything wrapped in plastic. Number 6. Tomatoes. The first greenhouse vegetable most families attempted. Tomatoes represented aspiration as much as thrift. Your father built a lean-to greenhouse from old window frames, salvaged from demolition sites, creating just enough warmth for tomato plants to thrive. By August, those vines hung heavy with red fruit. The smell of tomato leaves sharp and green, impossible to forget. The taste of homegrown tomatoes, warmed from the sun and eaten standing in the greenhouse, bore no resemblance to the pale imports in supermarkets. Bottled as pata made into chutney, or simply eaten fresh with salt, tomatoes transformed summer eating. Children raised on bland shop tomatoes believed they disliked the fruit until they tasted real ones. Growing conditions mattered enormously, and British gardeners became obsessive about feeding, watering, and pinching out side shoots. That obsession produced results. Homegrown tomatoes became a point of pride, proof that Britain could grow its own. Number 7. Potatoes, the king of the allotment. Potatoes were so valuable during rationing that growers padlocked their sheds and guarded their plots. A single potato plant produced 10 or 12 tubers, and a well-managed patch could yield 200 pounds of potatoes from just one seed pea. Potato sack costing 3 shillings. Your grandfather knew the varieties by name. King Edward for roasting, Maris Piper for chips, Charlotte for salads. He chitted them on windowsills in February, planted them when the soil warmed, and earthed them up as they grew to prevent greening. That first new potato harvest in June, tiny waxy gems boiled with mint and slathered in butter, was the reward for months of patient work. Main crop potatoes lifted in September, filled sacks that lined the shed, protected from light by Hessen cold enough to last until spring. Potatoes fed families when nothing else existed. The Irish famine proved what happened when they failed, and British allotment culture never forgot. Growing your own meant security, independence, and the foundation of nearly every meal. We have forgotten what this means. Number 8. Onions. Every kitchen in Britain relied on onions, and every allotment grew them. Sets planted in spring produced bulbs by August, the leaves yellowing and falling over to signal harvest time. Your grandfather lifted them, spread them on racks in the shed, and plaited them into ropes that hung in the kitchen for months. The smell of onions drying, papery skins crackling, meant winter preparations were underway. A rope of onions lasted from September until March, each bulb pulled as needed for stews, soups, and Sunday roasts. Growing your own meant spending nothing on the one vegetable that went into nearly every meal. When onion prices spiked in the 1970s due to crop failures abroad, allotment holders shrugged. They had enough already. The brown skins, the pungent smell, the eyes streaming as your mother chopped, all of it said homegrown self-sufficiency. Number 9. Carrots. Carrots were so valuable during the war that the government invented a lie to protect their strategic importance. The Ministry of Food claimed British pilots ate carrot to improve their night vision, encouraging civilians to grow more. The real secret was radar, but the carrot myth persisted. Your grandmother sowed them in sandy soil, thinning the rows ruthlessly to give roots room to swell. By autumn, those orange tapers pulled from the ground trailed soil and smelled of earth and sweetness. Stored in boxes of damp sand in the shed, carrots lasted until April, providing vitamin A through the entire winter. A single row produced 50 or 60 roots, enough to stretch until the new season began. Carrot fly was the enemy. Its larvae boring brown tunnels through otherwise perfect roots. Your grandfather learned to sow late, to surround rows with barriers, to companion plant with onions that confused the pest. All of this knowledge passed down through allotment culture, not through books, but through conversation across fence posts and sheds. Modern supermarkets sell carrots, washed, bagged, and trimmed, their origins invisible. Your grandmother knew exactly which row produced which root, and the flavor proved it. Number 10. Courgettes. The discovery that marrows picked young tasted entirely different and transformed summer eating. Your mother learned this in the 1970s, cutting finger-sized courgettes that fried crisp and golden in butter. The same plant that produced watery giant marrows delivered delicate vegetables when harvested early. This was economy multiplied. More frequent picking meant more courgettes from the same plant, sometimes 20 or 30 across the season. An abundant return. Sliced into ratatouille, grilled with herbs or battered and fried, courgettes became the fashionable vegetable of the 1980s. Yet the secret was ancient. Italian families had known it for generations. British growers simply forgot that small was better. One courgette plant cost nothing but a few seeds and delivered meals all summer. We paid £2 for 3 courgettes wrapped in plastic. Number 11. Marrows. When everything else on the allotment had been eaten, pickled or stored, marrows sat fatly on the compost heap, swelling to enormous size through late summer. Your grandfather grew them as insurance, knowing that one plant could produce 5 or 6 marrows, each weighing several pounds. Stuffed with leftover mince and baked, marrows became a meal in themselves. They stored in cool sheds until Christmas, the thick skin protecting the bland flesh inside. Marrow chutney filled jars across Britain, the spiced preserve lasting well into spring. Children complained about marrow, its watery texture and mild flavor uninspiring after the sweetness of peas. But when nothing else was ready, when the potato harvest was still weeks away, marrows filled the gap. That reliability mattered, more than flavor. You could count on marrows when you could count on nothing else. Number 12. Peas. Every child who grew up with an allotment remembers eating peas straight from the pod, the sweetness bursting in the mouth before a single pea made it to the kitchen. Your grandmother grew them in double rows, the plants supporting each other as they climbed, saving money on sticks and string. By June, those fat pods hung ready, the children sent to pick buckets of them for shelling. Pea shelling was a family activity. Everyone gathered around the kitchen table, splitting pods and filling bowls, while the empties piled for the compost heap. Nothing in any shop has ever tasted like fresh garden peas, the sugars not yet converted to starch. The sweetness so intense children treated them like sweets. Surplus went into freezers once families finally acquired them in the 1960s. Before that, your grandmother dried peas for winter, turning them into the thick pea soup that sustained miners and mill workers. A row of peas costing 6p in seeds produced enough to feed a family for weeks and still have surplus for neighbors. Number 13. Runner beans. The scarlet runner bean was not just a vegetable. It was a statement of working-class independence, towering 8 feet high on frames of bamboo or hazel poles. Runner bean wigwams announced that this family fed itself. By 1945, allotments across Britain grew so many runner beans that the Ministry of Food published special recipes for the surplus. Your grandfather picked buckets of them every other day through August. The long green pods sliced and salted in crocks for winter. That rhythmic slicing, the knife cutting diagonal pieces, the beans falling into the bowl, occupied summer evenings after work. Runner beans kept producing for 3 months if you kept picking. Miss a few days and the pods grew tough, the beans inside swelling past their best. Competition on northern allotments meant growers nursed pods over 2 feet long, though flavor suffered at that size. Scientists at the John Innes Center have recently shown that runner beans fix more nitrogen than almost any other garden plant, improving soil fertility for years afterwards. Your grandfather knew this without the science. He rotated his beans every season, and his brassicas followed in soil that needed no feeding. We buy French beans flown from Kenya now. Your grandfather grew enough to salt for winter, freeze for spring, and never once paid for beans between July and March. Number 14. French beans. While runner beans got the glory, French beans provided a steadier harvest with less fuss. Your grandfather sowed them in May and picked them from July onwards. The slender pods were ready every other day, through summer. Eaten fresh or pickled in vinegar for winter, French beans only needed regular picking to keep producing. A single row delivered enough beans to fill jars, to steam for dinner, and still give handfuls to neighbors. That tender crunch, barely blanched and served with butter, tasted nothing like the stringy tinned beans children suffered at school. Growing your own meant beans at their best, not the limp produce that had traveled for days in crates. Pickled jars on the pantry shelf meant vegetables in February when money disappeared without spending a penny. Number 15, broad beans. Broad beans were the first fresh protein of the garden year. They were sown in November and ready by June. Your grandmother shelled them at the kitchen table, filling colanders with pale green beans while the pods piled beside her. Children helped reluctantly, their thumbnails stained green from the work. Broad beans came ready before runner beans, before peas, before anything else that counted as proper food. By the mid-1950s, allotment holders grew enough to freeze in the new refrigerators appearing in working-class kitchens. The gray skin on shop-bought beans disgusted children, but homegrown beans picked young and cooked within hours tasted entirely different. A row of broad beans occupied poor soil, fixed nitrogen for the next crop, and delivered genuine meals when winter stores had run out. That first dish of broad beans with parsley sauce meant summer had finally arrived. Number 16, Brussels sprouts. The most divisive vegetable on any Christmas table, Brussels sprouts were grown on nearly every wartime allotment because they occupied ground from spring until December. Your grandfather set out transplants in May and ignored them until winter, letting the tight green buttons develop slowly on thick stalks. A single stalk produced 50 or 60 sprouts, enough for several meals, picked from the bottom upwards as the family needed them. Frost sweetened them, converting starches to sugars and removing that bitter edge. Children hated. National Food Survey figures from 1957 showed that 6 in 10 households ate spurred outs at least once a week during winter. Growing your own meant you controlled the timing, picking them small and sweet rather than the oversized cannonballs sold in shops. That patch of sprout plants standing in rows through December frosts symbolized self-sufficiency itself. Number 17, Savoy cabbage. The crinkled leaves of Savoy cabbage made it the hardiest brassica on any allotment, standing firm through temperatures that turned other cabbages to mush. Your grandfather planted them in June and cut them from December onwards. The dense heads provided fresh greens when the shops sold only tired imports. Shredded fine and stir-fried with bacon fat, Savoy cabbage became a side dish worth fighting over. Boiled too long, it smelled of sulfur and drew complaints, but cooked properly, it was almost sweet. That crisp texture held up in bubble and squeak better than any other cabbage. One plant could weigh 3 or 4 pounds by harvest, enough to feed a family for most of a week. Seeds cost pennies, required no special treatment, and rewarded even the laziest gardener. Number 18, kale. During the miners' strikes of 1972 and 1984, when wages stopped and grocery money vanished, kale kept families fed. It grew through winter when nothing else would, shrugging off frost, snow, and neglect. Your grandmother stripped leaves from the thick stems, boiled them with a ham bone, and served bowl after bowl of thick green soup. A packet of seeds cost just a few pence and produced enough plants to feed a street. Kale regrew after cutting, providing multiple harvests from the same plant. The Victorians called it cottage kale because it thrived on poor soil without fuss. Modern chefs now charge £4 for a kale salad. Your grandmother fed 5 people with one plant all winter long for free. Number 19, leeks. The national vegetable of Wales thrived across every allotment in Britain because leeks deliver when everything else had been harvested. Standing in frozen ground through January and February, they provided fresh greens when the larder held nothing but preserved vegetables. Your grandfather sowed them in spring, transplanted them into deep trenches in summer, and then left them to thicken through autumn. By the time winter arrived, those blanched white stems were ready for the pot. Leek and potato soup made with nothing more than homegrown vegetables and a stock cube fed families through the coldest months. A bundle of leeks cost 9 pence at the greengrocer in 1958, but growing your own meant warmth without spending. Show leeks became competitive on northern allotments, with growers nursing specimens over 2 feet long. Number 20, parsnips. The sweetest root in any British garden, Parsnips needed frost to develop their full flavor. Your grandfather left them in the ground through December and January, pulling them only when the kitchen needed filling. That patience was rewarded with roots so sweet they caramelized in the roasting tin beside the Sunday joint. Seeds cost threepence a packet in 1956, and they germinated slowly, testing the faith of new growers. By autumn, a single row delivered 30 or 40 roots, enough to last until spring. Parsnip wine was made on allotments across Yorkshire, a tradition born from surplus and the refusal to waste anything. Mashed with butter, roasted with honey, or diced into soup, parsnips stretched every meal further. Number 21. Swedes. Larger and sweeter than turnips, Swedes became the winter staple that no allotment was complete without. By October, the yellow-fleshed roots had swelled to the size of footballs, heavy enough that children struggled to carry them home from the plot. One Swede mashed with butter and pepper could serve an entire family. Your grandmother stored them in clamps, buried under straw in the garden where they stay. Fresh until February. The Women's Institute promoted Swede recipes during rationing, from Swede and carrot soup to mock apricot tart made entirely from root vegetables. That gentle sweetness, richer than turnip, but not quite as cloying as parsnip made, Swedes acceptable even to fussy eaters. When potato blight struck or harvests failed, Swedes filled the gap. They asked nothing but time, grew in the heaviest clay, and delivered calories when calories were currency. Number 22. Turnips. Turnips were the humble root that filled plates across working-class Britain. They grew fast, maturing in just 8 weeks from sowing, and tolerated the poorest soil on any allotment. Your grandfather sowed them in July after the early potatoes came out, making use of ground that would otherwise sit empty. By September, those white and purple globes were ready, their peppery flesh diced into stews or mashed with a knob of dripping. In Scotland, they called them neeps and served them with haggis. In England, turnips were simply survival. A pound of turnips cost 4p at the greengrocer in 1953, but growing your own meant the price was just the labor. Children complained about the strong flavor. Parents served them anyway because the alternative was an empty plate. Number 23. Beetroot. The blood-red roots that stained every chopping board in Britain became a kitchen staple precisely because they could be stored for months in sand-filled boxes in the coal shed. Your grandmother could pull beetroots in October and still be slicing them into salads the following March. A single row produced 40 or 50 roots from seeds costing threepence a packet. Pickled in malt vinegar, they lasted even longer. Jars lined up on pantry shelves like edible insurance against hard times. The leaves were eaten too, wilted like spinach when shop greens were dear. National Food Survey records from 1955 show that beetroot consumption doubled during winter months when little else was available fresh. That deep, earthy sweetness paired with cold meat and bread fed miners' families across South Wales and the North. Today we buy them vacuum-packed and pre-cooked. Your grandmother grew enough to last all winter for the price of a bread roll. Number 24. Radishes. The fastest vegetable in any British garden. Radishes went from seed to plate in 25 days. Your grandmother sowed them as markers between slower crops. Their quick germination showing exactly where the carrot rows would appear. Weeks later, a penny packet of seeds in 1952 produced enough radishes to fill a conder. Bright red globes that children pulled from the soil and ate on the spot, rubbing off the dirt on their jumpers. The peppery crunch was instant gratification in a garden where everything else demanded patience. Ministry of Food posters encouraged radish growing because even the smallest patch could produce results before summer arrived. On allotments across Birmingham and Sheffield, radishes filled the hungry gap between winter stores running out and spring crops coming ready. Some families grew them in old buckets on back doorsteps, proving you did not need an allotment to feed yourself. That simplicity mattered. When every penny counted, radishes asked almost nothing and gave everything back quickly. Number 25. Spring onions. While bulb onions took months to mature, spring onions gave impatient families something green in just 3 weeks. Your grandfather would sow them thickly in any spare corner, between rows of slower crops beside the compost heap, anywhere soil sat empty. By 1944, Dig for Victory leaflets recommended spring onions as the fastest return on any seed packet, costing just tuppence for enough to plant a whole row. Children were sent to pull bunches for tea. The white bulbs still trailing soil, the green top, sharp enough to make eyes water. In a time when shop-bought onions cost 4 pints a pound, growing your own made the Sunday roast possible. Spring onions stretched further, too. Chopped fine, a single bunch flavored a whole pot of soup. That peppery bite, raw and fresh, meant salads had punch even when lettuce was all you had. Modern supermarkets sell them in tiny bundles wrapped in plastic. Your grandfather grew enough to give away and still had more than he needed. Here is my challenge. This spring, grow just one thing from this list. Cabbages if you want to eat all winter, potatoes if you want independence, kale if you want to survive anything, or perpetual spinach if you want meals for 9 months from a single sowing. Come back and tell me which one you chose. I want to know if the old knowledge still works, because I tested it. I grew perpetual spinach last year, and I am still picking it now. My grandmother knew. Now you know too.